Commander Zeffar clicked his mandibles in what the other species had learned to recognize as satisfaction. The massive Krillian stood before the holographic display in the Galactic Military Academy's main briefing hall, his four arms gesturing toward the assembled cadets from 17 different worlds. "Today, we study warfare," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen 3 decades of interstellar conflict. Not theory, not simulation, real warfare, as practiced by various species throughout our galaxy. The cadets, a mix of crystalline Velnari, insectoid Chithari, gaseous ethereals contained in their mobility suits, and others shifted with interest. Combat analysis was a standard part of their curriculum, though most had only experienced the sanitized versions taught in tactical courses. Cadet Zilvan, a young Velnari whose crystalline form sparkled with nervous energy, raised her primary sensory appendage. "Commander, which species are we studying today?" Zeftar's compound eyes glittered. "Humans." A collective ripple of confusion passed through the cadets. The Chithari representative, Bzzkek, let out a confused trill. "Sir, humans are a recently contacted species. They've been part of the Galactic Confederation for only 3 cycles. Surely their military experience is limited." "Limited?" Zeftar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Young Bzzkek, your species has been spacefaring for 12,000 standard years. The Velnari have been at peace for so long they've nearly forgotten what war looks like. The Krillians, like myself, are considered among the galaxy's most feared warriors." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. And yet, in the entire recorded history of galactic civilization, no species has spent as much of its existence at war as humans have. The room fell silent. Even the ethereals, whose gaseous forms typically maintained constant motion within their suits, seemed to still. "Impossible," whispered Clara, an Aquarian whose gill slits fluttered with distress. "Our xenobiological studies indicate humans evolved on a remarkably peaceful world. Abundant resources, moderate climate zones, diverse but generally non-aggressive fauna." "Exactly," Zeffar interrupted. "They had no natural predators forcing them to develop defensive capabilities. No resource scarcity driving territorial conflicts. No environmental pressures necessitating warrior cultures. They created warfare entirely on their own, and then spent the next 10,000 years perfecting it." He gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show a blue and green planet slowly rotating in the center of the room. "Earth," he continued, "has been in a state of active warfare for 92% of its recorded history. At no point in the last 4,000 standard years has the entire planet been at peace simultaneously. While we developed warp drives and energy weapons, humans developed increasingly sophisticated ways to kill each other with whatever materials they had at hand." The cadets exchanged glances. This was beginning to sound less like a standard tactical analysis and more like a xenopsychology horror story. "Today," Zeffar announced, "we will observe archived footage from human conflicts, spanning their pre-space era to their recent integration into galactic society. I must warn you, some of you may find the content disturbing." As the lights dimmed and the first images began to play, none of the cadets suspected that by day's end, nearly half of them would be submitting resignation letters from military service. The first footage that flickered to life showed what appeared to be a massive field covered in primitive bipedal figures. The image quality was grainy, clearly ancient by galactic standards. "This is from approximately 2,500 Earth years ago," Zeffar narrated. "The Battle of Cani. Humans versus humans, using primitive metal weapons and basic tactical formations." Cadet Zilvan's crystalline form dimmed with confusion. "Sir, they're fighting their own species?" "Constantly," Zeffar replied matter-of-factly. "Humans have spent more time fighting each other than all other galactic species combined have spent fighting anyone." The footage showed the battle unfolding. What started as organized lines of soldiers quickly devolved into a massive, chaotic melee. The cadets watched in growing horror as humans threw themselves at each other with crude swords, spears, and shields, continuing to fight even when severely wounded. "Observe their persistence," Zeffar pointed out. That human there, see how he continues fighting with what appears to be a severe arm injury? And there, that one is still attempting to engage the enemy despite significant blood loss. BZZK's antennae twitched nervously. Commander, this seems inefficient. Why don't they retreat when injured? Retreat. Zeffar's mandibles clicked. Young cadet, humans invented the concept of fighting to the death, not as a last resort, but as a standard tactical doctrine. The scene shifted to show the aftermath. Thousands of bodies scattered across the field, many still clutching their weapons. The casualty rate for this single engagement was approximately 70,000 beings, Zeffar continued. This was considered a relatively small conflict by human standards. Clara's gills fluttered in distress. 70,000? That's more than most modern species lose in entire wars. This brings us to our next observation point, Zeffar said as the display changed to show a medieval castle under siege. Human warfare escalation, circa 1,000 Earth years ago. The new footage showed humans using massive wooden siege engines to hurl stones at fortified walls, while other humans poured boiling oil down on attackers. What struck the cadets most was the systematic nature of it. This wasn't primitive savagery, but organized, methodical violence. Note the sophistication, Zeffar observed. They've developed specialized engineering just for the purpose of destroying their own fortifications. Catapults, trebuchets, siege towers, all designed with one purpose: to more efficiently kill other humans. The footage showed human soldiers climbing ladders while arrows rained down on them, many falling only to be immediately replaced by others. They climb toward certain death, whispered an ethereal cadet, vapor swirling anxiously within their containment suit. This is not rational behavior. Rational. Zeffar paused the footage on an image of a human soldier, wounded but still climbing, determination etched on his face. Perhaps not by our standards, but observe the tactical complexity. These aren't mindless berserkers. They're calculating, strategic, and absolutely relentless. The footage continued, showing the castle eventually falling, followed by what appeared to be systematic looting and occupation. They don't just defeat their enemies, Zeffar noted. They study them, adapt their techniques, and incorporate their territories into larger strategic frameworks. Human warfare isn't just about winning individual battles. It's about permanently eliminating opposition. As the medieval footage ended, several cadets were already looking uncomfortable. The Velnari representative had dimmed to barely visible levels, while two of the Chithari were clicking their mandibles in distress patterns. Sir, ventured a small, tentacled cadet from the mollusk collective. Surely this was just their primitive phase? Most species outgrow such intensive violence as they develop technologically. Zeffar's forearms gestured toward the display, where new images were already loading. An excellent hypothesis, Cadet Gluub. Let's examine how humans adapted their warfare as their technology advanced. The next image that appeared made several cadets emit involuntary sounds of alarm. It showed rows upon rows of uniformed humans, stretching beyond the horizon, all carrying identical weapons and moving in perfect synchronization. World War I, Zeffar announced. Earth year 1914 to 1918. The first time humans organized their entire planet's resources around the concept of total warfare. As the footage began to play, showing massive explosions, primitive aircraft dropping explosives, and humans charging across barren landscapes into withering gunfire, it became clear that technological advancement had only made human warfare more terrifyingly efficient. And they were only getting started. The footage shifted to show vast factories with thousands of humans working assembly lines, but instead of consumer goods, they were producing artillery shells, rifles, and military vehicles at an incomprehensible scale. During their First World War, Zeffar explained, humans reorganized their entire planetary economy around warfare production. Civilian populations worked continuously to supply the front lines. The images changed to show massive artillery pieces being loaded and fired, the shells leaving craters the size of small buildings. They invented assembly line warfare, he continued. Standardized death on an industrial scale. Cadet Zilvan's crystalline form was now barely glowing. Commander, the energy expenditure alone. They converted their entire civilization into a war machine? For 4 years, Zeffar confirmed. And when it ended, they immediately began preparing for the next one. The footage jumped forward to show even more massive armies, mechanized vehicles, and aircraft darkening the skies. World War II, Earth years 1939 to 1945. They had learned from the first global conflict and improved upon it. What appeared next defied the comprehension of several species in the room. Massive aerial fleets dropping incendiary devices on population centers, reducing entire cities to ash. Armored vehicles moving in coordinated formations across continents. Naval vessels stretching beyond the horizon, engaging in battles that lasted for days. "The scale," whispered Clara, her aquatic form trembling. "How many humans were involved in this conflict?" "Over 100 million in active combat roles," Zeffar replied casually, "with entire civilian populations supporting the war effort. They developed production quotas for weapons that exceeded the total armament output of most galactic civilizations. But it was the next piece of footage that caused the first cadet resignation. The display showed a single aircraft flying over a city, followed by a flash of light brighter than most stars. When the glare faded, the city was gone, replaced by a mushroom-shaped cloud rising into the atmosphere. They developed weapons capable of destroying entire population centers instantly, Zeffar stated. And they used them. Cadet Gluub from the Mollusk Collective began shaking uncontrollably. They destroyed their own planet's cities? Their own species. Twice, Zeffar confirmed. And these weren't military targets. They were civilian population centers chosen specifically for maximum psychological impact. The tentacled cadet's translator barely managed to convey his next words through his distress. "I cannot. Commander, I must submit my withdrawal from military service. A species capable of this. We should not be studying them, we should be fleeing from them." As Gluub gathered his belongings and left the chamber, the remaining cadets sat in stunned silence. "Anyone else?" Zeffar asked matter-of-factly. 3 more cadets, 2 Velnari and a Chithari, quietly filed out. "Now," Zeffar continued as if nothing had happened, "let's examine how they transitioned into their space age." The footage shifted to show what appeared to be a small metal capsule streaking through space, followed by images of humans in bulky suits walking on their planet's moon. One might assume that achieving spaceflight would reduce their warlike tendencies, Zeffar observed. After all, most species view the conquest of space as transcending planetary conflicts. The display changed to show orbital platforms bristling with weapons, followed by footage of humans in spacesuits engaged in zero-gravity combat. Instead, they militarized space itself. Their first space stations were weapons platforms. Their exploration missions carried armaments. They even developed tactics for combat in vacuum conditions. BZZK's antennae were now lying flat against his head. A Chithari stress response. "Sir, surely when they joined the galactic community, they abandoned these practices?" Zeftar's compound eyes focused on the young cadet. "An excellent question. Let's examine some recent footage from human military exercises, conducted after their integration into galactic society." The new images made it clear that joining a peaceful galactic confederation had not diminished human military innovation in the slightest. The footage now showed sleek human warships moving in perfect formation through space, their hulls bristling with weapons that seemed to blend traditional projectile systems with advanced energy arrays. "This is from a recent human military exercise," Zeffar explained. "Notice how they've adapted galactic technology to their existing warfare doctrines." The cadets watched as the human ships engaged in mock combat with a precision and aggression that made their mandibles, antennae, and other appendages twitch with anxiety. "They've taken our energy shielding technology and turned it into offensive weapons," Zeffar pointed out as one ship's shields suddenly expanded outward, crushing a mock asteroid target. "Our faster-than-light communication arrays have become coordination systems for fleet-wide tactical strikes." Our terraforming equipment has been adapted into planetary siege weapons. Clara's gills were fluttering so rapidly she had to activate her breathing apparatus. They weaponized terraforming equipment? Observe, Zeffar said as the footage showed a barren planet being rapidly transformed. But instead of becoming habitable, it was being systematically stripped of resources while automated defense systems emerged from the ground. They call it hostile terraforming, he explained. The ability to simultaneously deny territory to enemies while establishing their own fortified positions. They invented it in the 6 months after learning our terraforming techniques. The footage shifted to show human soldiers in combat, but these weren't the primitive warriors from earlier recordings. These humans moved with mechanical precision, their armor interfacing seamlessly with their weapons, their tactics adapted for dozens of different environmental conditions. What disturbs our military analysts most, Zeffar continued, is not their technology, it's their adaptability. Most species develop one style of warfare suited to their physiology and environment. Humans have developed everything. The display showed rapid-fire examples. Humans fighting in underwater environments with techniques borrowed from their aquatic allies, humans using energy weapons in formations clearly derived from their ancient phalanx tactics, humans conducting aerial combat with fighter craft that moved like their primitive cavalry. They don't replace old tactics, they integrate them, Zeffar observed. A human soldier today trains in hand-to-hand combat techniques that are thousands of years old, alongside weapons systems that didn't exist 5 years ago. The footage showed a particularly disturbing example. Human commandos infiltrating what appeared to be a space station, using a combination of advanced cloaking technology and primitive silent weapons to systematically eliminate defenders. Note the efficiency, Zeffar pointed out. No wasted motion, no unnecessary violence, but absolutely no mercy either. They've refined warfare into an art form. Another cadet, one of the remaining Chithari, suddenly stood up. I apologize, Commander, but I cannot continue. My species spent 2,000 years learning to resolve conflicts through negotiation and mutual benefit. Watching this is traumatic. As the second Chithari left, Zeffar nodded understandingly. The psychological impact of human warfare footage is well documented. Many species find it difficult to process. He gestured, and the display shifted to show what appeared to be a human training facility. This brings us to perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human military culture, how they create soldiers. The footage showed human children, barely past adolescence, engaged in intensive physical training, tactical simulations, and weapons practice. They begin military conditioning before physical maturity, Zeffar explained. Most species wait until full development before considering military service. Humans start preparing for warfare as soon as they can walk. The images showed increasingly complex training scenarios. Humans learning to fight in zero gravity, underwater, in extreme temperature conditions, and in environments toxic to most galactic species. They don't just train for fighting other humans, Zeffar observed. They prepare for fighting anyone, anywhere, under any conditions. The footage showed human cadets, younger than most of the aliens in the room, successfully completing tactical exercises that would challenge experienced galactic military officers. Sir, ventured Zilvan, whose crystalline form was now flickering with stress patterns. What happens when human military training is combined with galactic technology? Zeffar's mandibles clicked ominously. That brings us to our final section. Recent developments in human military doctrine. As the display began loading new footage, 2 more cadets quietly excused themselves from the chamber. The remaining students prepared themselves for what they suspected would be the most disturbing revelation yet. They had no idea how right they were. The new footage showed what appeared to be a routine diplomatic meeting between humans and representatives from various galactic species. The setting was peaceful, a neutral space station designed for interspecies cooperation. This is from 6 months ago, Zeffar began. A standard trade negotiation between the human colony of New Terra and the Hegemony Mining Collective. The cadets watched as the meeting proceeded normally, with typical diplomatic discussions about mineral rights and shipping routes. Then, without warning, armed hegemony enforcers stormed the conference room. The hegemony attempted to use military force to impose their terms, Zeffar explained. A standard intimidation tactic used against newly contacted species. What happened next defied every expectation of how a diplomatic incident should unfold. The moment the armed enforcers appeared, every human in the room moved with mechanical precision. In less than 3 seconds, improvised weapons had been crafted from the conference table itself. In 5 seconds, half the enforcers were neutralized. In 10 seconds, the remaining hegemony forces had surrendered. They turned a diplomatic meeting into a tactical engagement without missing a beat, Zeffar observed. Using furniture as weapons, negotiation protocols as combat coordination, and their own diplomatic immunity as psychological warfare. The footage continued, showing the human diplomatic team calmly resuming negotiations while the disarmed hegemony enforcers stood in confused submission. The negotiations concluded with terms significantly more favorable to humanity, Zeffar noted. The hegemony now considers humans challenging to intimidate. Clara's breathing apparatus was working overtime. They turned diplomacy into warfare? No, Zeffar corrected. They revealed that for humans, diplomacy has always been warfare by other means. The display shifted to show a series of human colonies established throughout the galaxy. At first glance, they appeared to be standard civilian settlements, residential areas, agricultural zones, industrial facilities. Human colonial expansion, Zeffar announced. Notice anything unusual? The cadets studied the images carefully. Gradually, patterns emerged that made their appendages twitch with recognition. The residential areas are arranged in defensive formations, whispered Zilvan. The agricultural zones double as landing fields for military craft, added BZZ. Every industrial facility can produce military hardware. Clara concluded with growing horror. Correct, Zeffar confirmed. Humans don't build colonies, they build forward operating bases disguised as colonies. Every human civilian settlement can transform into a military stronghold within hours. The footage demonstrated this transformation, showing peaceful farming communities rapidly converting into fortified positions with overlapping fields of fire, underground bunker networks, and concealed weapons emplacements. They colonize territory the same way they conduct warfare, with multiple backup plans and redundant systems, Zeffar observed. A human colony isn't just a place to live. It's a beachhead for further expansion and a fortress for defending existing territory. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. This brings us to the most recent development in human military thinking, Zeffar announced as new footage began loading. Their integration philosophy. The display showed human military advisors working alongside various galactic species, apparently helping them improve their own defensive capabilities. At first, this appeared to be typical post-contact cooperation, Zeffar explained. Humans sharing their expertise to help allied species improve their security. The footage showed human trainers teaching Velnari crystal warriors more effective combat formations, helping Chithari soldiers adapt their natural agility for tactical advantage, and working with ethereal commanders to optimize their gaseous forms for reconnaissance. But observe the pattern, Zeffar continued as the montage continued. They're not just helping other species fight better, they're learning how other species fight. The truth became clear as the footage showed human soldiers demonstrating combat techniques that were clearly adapted from every species they'd encountered. They've developed hybrid fighting styles combining their own aggression with the natural advantages of every galactic species, Zeffar explained. Human soldiers now fight with Chithari agility, Velnari energy manipulation, ethereal phase shifting, and Aquarian environmental adaptation. The final piece of footage showed a group of human commandos engaged in a training exercise, but their opponents weren't other humans. They were holographic representations of every known galactic species. They're preparing to fight everyone, Clara whispered in horror. Not fight, Zeffar corrected. Defeat. Efficiently, completely, and permanently. As the implications sank in, 3 more cadets quietly gathered their belongings and left the chamber. The remaining students sat in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed. Commander, ventured one of the few remaining cadets. What does this mean for galactic security? Zefftar's compound eyes focused on the young being. That brings us to our final lesson. The chamber was now less than half full, with only the most determined, or most disturbed, cadets remaining. Zeffar surveyed the survivors with what might have been approval. Those who remain have witnessed the comprehensive documentation of human warfare evolution, he began. From primitive tribal conflicts to galactic-scale strategic thinking. You've seen their adaptability, their relentlessness, and their systematic approach to violence. He paused, letting the weight of the previous hours settle over the room. Now I will tell you why this matters to our military doctrine. The display shifted to show a map of the galaxy, with human territories marked in blue, various galactic powers in different colors, and large sections marked in ominous red. The red zones represent the Devourers, Zeffar explained, referencing the extragalactic force that had been slowly consuming the outer rim worlds for the past decade. A species we know almost nothing about, except that they systematically destroy every form of life they encounter. The cadets knew about the Devourers, everyone did. The galactic military had been struggling to develop effective countermeasures against an enemy that seemed to adapt to every tactic, learn from every engagement, and grow stronger with each victory. Our traditional military doctrine has proven inadequate, Zeffar continued. Chithari agility means nothing when the enemy adapts to our speed within hours. Velnari energy manipulation becomes useless when they develop countermeasures faster than we can deploy new techniques. Ethereal phase shifting is irrelevant against an enemy that exists partially outside normal spacetime. The map zoomed in to show the contested border regions, where galactic forces had been steadily losing ground. We've tried everything our species know about warfare, Zeffar stated flatly. And we're losing. He gestured, and the display showed recent battle footage from the front lines. Galactic forces engaging in what appeared to be hopeless conflicts against shadowy, adaptive enemies that seemed to anticipate every move. Then the humans volunteered for frontline duty. The footage shifted to show human ships joining galactic fleets, human soldiers fighting alongside alien allies, human tactical advisors working with galactic command structures. The results, Zeffar announced, were unprecedented. What followed was combat footage unlike anything the cadets had seen before. Human forces engaging the Devourers with a combination of relentless aggression and tactical flexibility that seemed to actually surprise the enemy. Humans don't just adapt to enemy tactics, Zeffar explained as the footage showed a human unit switching between completely different combat styles mid-battle. They deliberately use unpredictable combinations of techniques that prevent adaptation. The cadets watched in fascination as human soldiers employed ancient sword tactics with energy weapons, used diplomatic protocols as deception strategies, and turned retreat maneuvers into flanking attacks. More importantly, Zeffar continued, they don't just fight to win individual battles, they fight to understand their enemies. The footage showed human forces deliberately engaging in seemingly disadvantageous conflicts, taking casualties that appeared tactically wasteful until patterns emerged. They sacrificed short-term efficiency for long-term strategic advantage, Zeffar observed. Each engagement teaches them something new about Devourer capabilities, even when they lose. The display showed a tactical analysis that revealed the systematic nature of human learning. Every loss was catalogued, every enemy adaptation was studied, every successful technique was immediately integrated into doctrine and shared across all human forces. In 6 months of engagement, Zeffar announced, human forces have learned more about Devourer capabilities than we learned in 5 years of conflict. The footage shifted to show recent battles where human-led coalitions had achieved something previously thought impossible. Actual victories against the Devourers. But here's what makes this truly significant. Zeffar continued as the display showed human trainers working with galactic forces. They're teaching us. The cadets watched as human advisors demonstrated how to combine traditional galactic tactics with human strategic thinking. Chithari units learning to use their agility unpredictably. Velnari forces discovering how to make their energy manipulation adaptive rather than reactive. Ethereal commanders developing phase-shifting techniques that confused rather than simply avoided enemy detection. Human warfare doctrine isn't just about fighting, Zeffar explained. It's about learning, adapting, and teaching. They're not trying to replace our tactics. They're trying to make our tactics more human-like. Claria's gills fluttered with a mixture of hope and terror. More human-like? More unpredictable. More adaptive. More relentless, Zeffar confirmed. They're teaching us to think like predators instead of defenders. The display showed the most recent battle reports, with casualty figures and territorial gains that painted a dramatically different picture from the steady losses of previous years. The Galactic Military is winning, Zeffar announced. Not because we have better technology or superior numbers, but because we're learning to fight like humans. He turned to address the remaining cadets directly. This is why you needed to see this footage. Not to terrify you, though that's an understandable reaction, but to prepare you for the new reality of galactic military service. The display shifted to show training scenarios where cadets from various species worked alongside human instructors, learning combat techniques that combine their natural abilities with human strategic thinking. Those who remain will be trained in hybrid warfare doctrine, Zeffar announced. You'll learn to think tactically like humans while retaining your species' natural advantages. You'll be taught to adapt, to be unpredictable, and to view every conflict as a learning opportunity. Zilvan's crystalline form flickered with nervous energy. Commander, what about those who resigned? Zeftar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. They made a rational choice based on their psychological profiles. Not every being is suited for human-style warfare. But those who are. He gestured toward the remaining cadets. You represent the future of galactic military effectiveness. The display showed one final image, a mixed unit of humans and aliens working in perfect coordination, their diverse abilities seamlessly integrated into a single, devastatingly effective fighting force. The Devourers taught us that our traditional approaches to warfare were inadequate, Zeffar concluded. Humans taught us that warfare itself could be revolutionary. As the lights came up and the session ended, the surviving cadets sat in contemplative silence. They had witnessed something that challenged every assumption about conflict, cooperation, and the nature of military service itself. Half their classmates had resigned, unwilling to embrace the psychological demands of human-style warfare. The remaining half would become the foundation of a new kind of galactic military, one that fought not just to defend, but to learn, adapt, and ultimately transform the very nature of conflict itself. As they filed out of the briefing hall to begin their new training regimen, each cadet carried with them a profound understanding. They were no longer just soldiers of their individual species. They were becoming something unprecedented in galactic history, warriors trained in the human art of making warfare itself evolve. And for the first time since the Devourers had appeared, the galaxy had reason to hope that evolution would be enough.